David Quinn's been a head coach for 2 NHL teams now, and yet he might never have faced a taller task than the one he now faces here in Pittsburgh. Good morning to you. Good Tuesday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Penguins. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into football and or baseball, I also offer daily shots of Steelers and Pirates in the same place that you found this tonight at PPG Paints Arena, the preseason home opener between the Penguins and the Sabres, or to see their roster, a reasonable facsimile of the Sabres minor league system, because the parent Sabres are getting ready to head to Europe for an overseas series. So, some fun could be had by the Penguins aren't exactly loading it up either tonight, unless you would consider Noel Acciari and Ryan Graves to be ringers. So the more interesting stuff will continue to happen in Cranberry, and yesterday saw the first emergence of real live power play work, including real live power play alignments. Now, what was to be taken from those? As Mike Sullivan put it, in a word, nothing. And he's right, because the first unit had Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang, Ricard Raquel, and Brian Rust. Missing from that group, conspicuously missing because he's not yet available since he's hurt, Erik Karlsson. Also missing from that group, and at least in my mind, conspicuously so, was Michael Bunting, who I thought, to an extent, was a terrific add in this specific regard, primarily because he was the only guy who could do the bumper thing. You know, going up to the front of the net, backing off into the high slot, taking passes from the point men there to try to attack the soft middle, shooting when necessary, crashing when necessary. He was good at it. But again, let's take Sullivan at his word. Nothing. So what would have been the something in the equation? Well, this was how Sullivan explained what Quinn, the poor soul, who's now the head cat herder in the organization, trying to make truly great players truly productive on the power play.
There's opportunity there. There's a huge window of opportunity. If we can retrieve pucks and have success and then have a quick strike mindset. And if you want my opinion, I think in my time here, just my own observation of the group we have is that's when our guys are at their best, because it's instinctive play. It's not any setup or framework or set play where we're going to try to make this highlight reel goal and we're going to pass it in the net. It's hockey. It's just hockey. And so I think those are important elements. I think we need people that are with a willingness and a buy-in to have that workman mindset.
All right. I can buy that. I think as a starting point, as a, hey, everybody, my name is David Quinn, that's a good way to introduce yourself. To remind everybody that it's still hockey. Power play doesn't have to come in all caps. It's just another phase of the game in which you're trying to score goals. Or if you're the Penguins power play, you're also trying to prevent goals, at least trying a little bit. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online, your number one source for all your summer sports needs this season, from Major League Baseball, golf, NHL, NBA playoffs. Get the latest odds and lines, including all team matchups, player props, odds on just about everything that's out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet Online, where the game starts. But it makes sense. If you picture in your head, if you can handle this painful imagery, the Penguins setting up in somebody's attacking zone. The opponent's penalty killers are a little bit aggressive, but not too much. They basically stay inside the box. And the Penguins just go slowly around the perimeter. Letang to Crosby, back to Letang, across to Malkin, down to Rust, back to Malkin, across. Yeah, see? I got you, didn't I? But that's what they did. And there was no urgency to it at all. There was no, wow, we might lose possession here. We'd better hurry up and attempt to generate a scoring chance. And that, more than anything, permeated itself through the entire power play process. And that's also why when you would put someone of, lesser skill, lesser experience, like say, for example, a Valtteri Puustinen, he'd look like a unicorn because he's skating around really hard and he's going after the puck and he's shooting it. And the rest of these guys are just standing there looking at him like he's nuts until eventually he'd assimilate as well. So, yes, this is a nice thing to say on day one. There's obviously got to be a lot more to it. There's got to be concepts. There's got to be objectives. There's got to be trigger people. If you've been listening to this show for a while, you'll know that this was something that I've focused on regularly on this program. The lack of a true trigger type player, a gunner, someone who just shoots first and thinks later. I don't know that player's on this roster, but I know that player has to somehow be created. But setting this as the framework, as Quinn and Sullivan have clearly done, to me puts the bar in the right place for everybody, not just the living legends and future Hall of Famers, for everybody. They have to understand that if they don't operate with that type of urgency, they're going to be bringing the whole thing down, just like they did throughout last season. When we come back, J1Q. Today's J1Q isn't a question at all, but it's definitely worthy of consideration. Brian says, DK, the potential's there to assemble a very useful and perhaps difference-making third line in Rutger McGroarty or Drew O'Connor, along with Lars Eller and Jesse Puljujärvi. Now, Brian shares this in response to yesterday's episode that focused entirely on Puljujärvi. And I've gone back and forth with Brian over the years often enough to know that he's interested mostly in having the Penguins be bigger and snarlier. And if snarlier isn't actually a word, it should be now. That said, I'm not exactly opposed to that. I think you could even work something like that together with Kevin Hayes, who's a big dude as well, bigger than Eller. But being that Hayes is coming off a pretty rough year in St. Louis, and Eller's coming off what I thought was a wonderful year here in Pittsburgh, I'd be still more inclined to have Eller be in the third line / offensive leaning mode. So if you get O'Connor involved, which I really don't think is likely because he's going to be on the first line. But if you do, and Puljujärvi's over there, you're talking about a line that's going to be pointing way more forward than backward. Wingers, certainly. And even though I don't think you're going to see a whole bunch of, banging or certainly not any, 1970s style rough stuff from this crew, you could see the effect of, say, a typical O'Connor shift, or what we've seen already in this camp and the one preseason game from Puljujärvi. They're big bodies who'll play physically in the way Mike Sullivan wants his players to play physically, and that means do everything that you have to do, not only to win the puck, but to then put yourself into a position to do something intelligent with the puck. That's when you might have something there. That's when you might have some kind of chemistry, ideally, evolve, although you don't really ever know about these things until you try. That's just hockey. But again, that's the likeliest scenario for a lot of these guys. They know what the open spots are. They know they're almost entirely on the third and fourth lines. Again, somebody would have to beat out O'Connor, and that's just not going to happen. Not based on what I've seen and heard so far. Now, before I close out for the day, I'd be remiss if I didn't address you bringing up McGroarty specifically. I haven't mentioned him yet in my response, and there's a reason for that. I did say in sharing my genuine excitement about the Penguins' acquisition of him from Winnipeg that he'd need to have a monster camp in order to stick. I stand by that, and I'll say that right now he's not having a monster camp. That's not a knock. It's not a criticism. It's not anything. Kid turned pro a couple of weeks ago. He's got a ton to absorb, not just about the parts of his game that he'd have to add, defensive responsibilities and so forth, but even the parts that he's really good at, because it might not necessarily apply not just to the NHL level, not just to the Penguins, not just to Sullivan, but even to whatever line mates he happens to be out there with. So especially in this setting where you have so many NHL level players and, more importantly, a real reason to have him spend time in the minors, that's what you do. I appreciate everyone who listens to Daily Shot of Penguins. I'll be at the rink tonight watching Penguins versus Sabres, or a couple of Penguins versus no Sabres, and I'll have fresh material for you from there tomorrow morning.